Hey, thanks for stopping by to talk about history for a minute. I was originally not going to record a video today and upload it today, but I changed my mind because today is a consequential day in world history, and I was dismayed that I did not see any coverage of this in the mainstream media or the news or even on social media. I didn't see anybody talking about this, but today, July 28th, marks a sad day in the course of human history, and that is on July 28th, 1914, was the day that the Austrian-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia and first started shelling Belgrade, essentially starting World War One. And this was around in retaliation for the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So this is really the start of World War One. This is the first domino to fall, anyway, that leads to more nations joining the war and the war becoming a much bigger and deadlier conflict. And I didn't want the day to go by without commemorating that and remembering that and talking with you about the importance of that day. And I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the significance of World War One, but right off the top, it claims the lives of 16.5 million people. It's the deadliest war in human history, probably up to that point, before World War II. And then there are millions of more people who are grievously wounded and suffer the consequences of that mentally and physically for the rest of their lives. It creates all kinds of damage to the environment. The war has lasting consequences for the political, economic, and military history of the world. It sets the stage for the influenza in 1918, the influenza outbreak in 1918. It really, it doesn't cause directly the influenza outbreak, but it sort of sets the stage for a disease to run wild. You have people who are coming from different parts of the globe and living together, spreading diseases, sharing diseases, and they're living in camps that are not the most sanitary conditions. They're living on trains. They're living on steamships and so forth, and they're spreading diseases. And so it really gives rise to the what they called back then the Spanish influenza, but now we just call it the Great Influenza or the influenza of 1918. And in my own family's history, it may have claimed the life of my great grandmother in 1918. There are those consequences. The Great War also ends three different dynasties. It was the end of the Habsburg dynasties, which sat on the throne of many different European nations over the centuries. It was the end of the Romanovs, who had been the czars, the rulers of Russia for generations. And there was also the end of the Hohenzollerns. Those are the Kaisers who had been in charge of Germany, and before that Prussia. So there were those consequences. World War One was also the first war, maybe not the first war, but one of the first, or the first major war with really industrialized death. That you saw in modern technologies such as the first widespread use of machine guns, the first use of tanks in war, the first widespread use of airplanes and submarines in warfare, first use of zeppelins in warfare. So, first use of chemical weapons, first use of a lot of weapons of mass destruction. So this was a carnage on a different scale than what the world had seen before. Kind of maybe the American Civil War kind of gives a sort of foreshadowing of this, but World War One takes it to the next level, and it gets to a point in the middle of the war where a lot of people wonder if this is the end of progress. That Western civilization had developed all this new technology, and then instead of using it to make people's lives better, they used it to kill each other as quickly as possible. So it was just a meat grinder, in a lot of cases, a stalemate that was just leading to more and more and more death. So people really began to question: is civilization in an existential crisis at this point? So there are those consequences. Of course, World War One also sets the stage for World War Two. The Treaty of Versailles creates the conditions, and we could debate this for a long time, but um, it creates the conditions where Germany is not rebuilt, but instead is penalized and blamed for the war. So that, along with other factors, like anti-Semitism and so forth, that leads to World War Two. Another factor is that the Japan, who had been an ally in World War One, was not invited to the treaty negotiations at Versailles. So Japan was excluded, and so Japan continues this colonial imperialistic march in the Pacific. And eventually, that's going to lead to conflict with the Allies, including the United States and Great Britain. The consequences there of really World War One setting the stage for World War Two. Of course, a lot of the dominant figures of World War Two are present in World War One. Eisenhower, MacArthur, Patton. So you have military figures. Rommel are all present in World War One. Churchill. And then, of course, Adolf Hitler is a soldier in World War One and will become the Chancellor of Germany in World War Two. So a lot of important figures are in both conflicts. So really an important date in world history. And I did not want to let it go by without commemorating it, remembering the victims of the war. And that's another thing that's important about another consequence of the war is that um, this is one of the world's big genocides, the Armenian genocide, where there is maybe as many as over a million and a half victims at the hands of the Ottoman Empire at the end of the war. One of the world's major genocides takes place at the end of World War One. So definitely an important day in world history and an important day in many nations' history is today. And I was just shocked that there was not more coverage of that or more discussion of that. So I wanted to make sure there was at least one voice somewhere out there in some corner of the internet remarking that today was the beginning of World War One in 1914. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Check me out next time on The Desperate Historian.